This is a collection of videos and photographs that I took on the 1st of October in Penang of a number of little stints. There was a fairly large roost of 2,000 or 3,000 small waders, probably about 1,000 redneck stints. And so every time I spotted a little stint, I just would video it or photograph it, or preferably both, and then later on tried to figure out how many birds there were because they were scattered amongst the flock. So this is a collection of those pictures and videos. This is the first little stint I found. It's an adult molting from breeding to non-breeding plumage. The coverts and tertials have these quite bright orange edges, and the scapulars, mantle and head are kind of a smoky grey colour with extensive dark centres to the larger feathers. And this is generally darker and more blotchy than a fresh adult redneck stint in non-breeding plumage. Structurally it stands out because it's got longer legs, it's got this distinctive long tapered bill, it's got a small head that sits on top of the body, and it has a fat little body that's more of a sort of ball shaped compared to the more horizontal rugby ball shaped body of the redneck stints. Here's the second adult. This is quite a distinctive bird because it's dropped a number of greater coverts, and as you can see, it still has the remnants of the breeding plumage breastband, but most of it is in now adult non-breeding plumage. And so it's dropped its tertials, it's dropped 1 or 2 greater coverts, so it's quite a distinctively different bird. Often little stints, as well as showing these darker centres to the scapulars and mantle, show whitish tips to the fresh scapulars, and because the centre of the feather is dark, these seem to stand out more than your average redneck stint. It's not a diagnostic feature, but it's a useful thing that might draw your attention when you're first looking through a flock. Again, the distinctive appearance of little stint is shown here. The long legs, which are often held flexed, it seems to have further to reach to the ground, so it tends to be more tipping forward when it feeds. And it's also consistently, I think, little stints are more active when they're feeding than redneck stints. In a moment we'll see a fresh non-breeding plumage redneck stint, and you'll notice the much more uniform, paler, frostier grey appearance on the upper parts compared to this little stint. There it is, that's the redneck. Thicker head, or bigger head, thicker neck, generally paler and more uniform upper parts. Again, notice how active the little stint is. This is bird number 3, another adult non-breeding, mostly non-breeding. It has a single distinctive black scapula on the left-hand side. This bird particularly shows the distinctive feeding angle of the body. Because it's got such long legs, when it tips forward to feed, the wingtips go up at a sort of more or less a 45-degree angle. If you look at the sort of dark leading edge of the wing as it contrasts with the white belly, you see this very steep angle as it feeds, compared to the more horizontal feeding stance of the shorter legged, shorter necked redneck stint. Again, feeding extremely actively compared to redneck. Here's little stint number 4, another adult, this time more or less completely in non-breeding plumage. The extent of the distinctness of the head pattern varies from bird to bird. This one has a fairly indistinct supercilium, and some birds have quite plain heads, whereas others have very obviously white marked supercilium. If you've got your eyes open, you might have noticed the other little stint coming in from the right of the frame briefly. There it is. Here's little stint number 5, an adult in full non-breeding plumage, and this might be a bit more challenging to identify because you're really just looking at the structure of it, in particular the head shape, the body shape, the bill shape, plus the slightly blotchy, dark, grey-centred, pale fringed scapulars. But this is quite a tricky one until you have your eye in. The 6th adult, another one that's probably less obvious, plus the video is not great. But this is a really tiny little bird. It looks small. It's rather washed out, plain, pale bleach perhaps. Again, looking at the structure of the head, particularly the little head that sits on top of the body, the fine tapered bill. It's actually squatting down here because a white-bellied sea eagle is flying overhead. This is the 8th adult, another in full non-breeding plumage. Very actively feeding as it sort of races past the much more sluggish redneck stints. I hope by looking at a number of different individuals you're beginning to get a picture of the jizz of the bird, the distinctive head shape. Sometimes they look quite snouty. The forehead is quite a shallow angle as it goes to the bill. Incidentally, the leg length, obviously this does look long-legged, but in a moment you'll see a juvenile redneck stint that comes in here, extremely long-legged. And so don't just go on one feature, you have to really look at the whole suite of features until you can be sure you have a real genuine little stint. This one has quite a distinctive head pattern with a clearly white supercilium. Adult number 8, this is a bird in transition between breeding and non-breeding plumage. Still has quite a lot of breeding plumage feathers on the breast and the coverts. Fairly indistinct head pattern, and you'll notice it has olive-coloured legs. Not all little stints have black legs. The bill is very subtly finer and less blob-tipped than redneck stints, although comparing them it's difficult to slightly, maybe a little longer as well, although there's not much in it. It's more of an impression. But notice how even in this picture there's more of a neck on the little stint compared to the rednecks. And again you have these nice bright orange edges to the coverts. Here's adult number 9, another bird in transition between breeding and non-breeding, rather nondescript. Again, it's got sort of brownish legs. This bird's actually trying to cough up a pellet of all the ingestible parts of the food that it's been feeding on. So this one's quite bland, colourless bird, not much in the way of distinctive appearance. So again, we're mainly looking at the structure of it. Although we can see some nice chestnut fringes to some of those old adult breeding wing coverts there. Moving on to the non-adult birds, these are a series of birds which were hatched this year. Their wings are have juvenile plumage, but they've already started to molt into first non-breeding or first winter plumage with these grey scapulars. This is the first of them. The easiest way to age them is to look at the wing coverts. These dark-centered, pale-edged coverts in neat little rows that sets them apart from adults. This particular bird has a fairly prominent supercilium on the right-hand side, but a much less distinct one on the left-hand side. It's the bird feeding in the middle of the water. It was initially quite distant. Again, hyperactive compared to the redneck stints. And the distinctive head shape and body shape, although it's spent quite a lot of its time hiding behind this lesser sandplover. Notice again the steep angle of the wings as it feeds, and the long legs. Now the same bird quite a bit closer. It looks small compared to the accompanying redneck stints, and they're rounder with a smaller head. Notice that the redneck stints that are feeding in the water seem to have quite long legs too. I guess because they're compressing their belly feathers tight up against their skin, so that can expose more of the leg length. So it's not always a great feature. But I do think that little stint probably has thinner legs than redneck stints, as well as being longer. This is the second of 3 first winter little stints I saw. This one's particularly long-legged and looks very elegant. It has very distinct supercilium on both sides of the head. You can tell it's a juvenile by looking at the neat rows of coverts with dark centers and even gingery fringes. This shot against the water enables you to appreciate the distinctive shape of the bird. Particularly the head is interesting. Rather than being square or blockish with a distinct angle at the back of the crown and steep forehead like redneck, little stints tend to have a very gently sloping rear crown or nape to crown angle, and also a fairly shallow sloping forehead, which tends to give them this, what I call a snouty expression earlier. Notice that the crown is fairly evenly coloured right the way across between the two supercilia, whereas in redneck it tends to get distinctly paler in the lateral region. Get a good view of the difference between the head shape of the little stint and redneck. Well, I'll save the best to last. I was scanning the far end of the roost, and I came across this incredible looking creature, burnished bronze or orange colour. I initially took it to be an adult little stint, but subsequently realised that it was actually a bird in first breeding plumage. So it's a bird that hatched last year and probably just went through a rather leisurely body molt over this past summer, and now it's still got it. It's got fresh scapulars, mantle, head, plumage, but very, very worn wings, wing coverts and primaries. So I thought this was worth getting a closer view of. I managed to get round to the other side of the roost, and the birds were very accommodating, so I managed to get a much closer view of it. Really is a stunning looking creature. I even managed to get its call. Here you can get a better view of the extremely worn, uniform state of the wing coverts and the primaries, all the wing. So that's what makes me realise it's a first breeding plumage bird. So altogether, at least 16 little stints that day. I hope this video will help those of you who are looking for little stints to maybe pick 1 or 2 up as they're moving through at this time. And if you're interested in redneck stints, hopefully you'll have got a chance to compare how little stints are different from redneck. Thanks for watching. Happy wader watching.